Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Security Space podcast. Today what we're discussing is all about how digital forensics has transformed police investigations over the decades. So what do I mean by that? Well, essentially digital forensics used to be a very niche specialist discipline, but with the advancements of CCTV, cloud, mobile phones, IoT, smart home management systems, digital forensics has absolutely shifted over the last couple of decades. And with me today is John Price to discuss all about how that shift has actually affected John's role in the past couple of decades. Now, as you can see, we have got a completely new setting today. I have not been reprimanded. We are in the back of a police van to kind of give you guys a little bit of sort of a bit of background, a bit of a change. And John is basically the Detective Sergeant Team Lead of Digital Forensics and Instant Response at West Midlands Police. But John, thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Sure.
Are you okay, just to let the audience know a little bit about yourself, if that's okay?
Yeah, absolutely, Nick. So, John Price, I've been in the police now for 28 years. I joined the police in 1998, and originally I joined British Transport Police. Before that, I come from a military background. Around about 2001, I transferred into West Midlands Police, and from there I was just normally on response, then on to CID, and then in 2007 I started on the counter-terrorism unit, and that was the start of my digital journey doing digital forensics. Was on that for a number of years, and then I left the promotion route within policing, and then in 2016 I took over one of the teams within digital forensics, and that was covering mobiles and computers. Significantly since that time we've had a lot of change within digital forensics, so what we call Project Fusion, where we no longer have any separate computers or mobile team. So we've got joint teams now around acquisition and reporting. And in 2023 we started a digital scene attendance team, which I know we'll talk about later. I won't cover that off. I was fortunate in 2024, in the New Year's Honours, I was given, I was recommended for a King's Police Medal around stuff that we've done in digital forensics. I was really honoured and humbled to have that. And yeah, so I now run a team around our digital scene attendance and our incident response side around West Midlands Police.
Fantastic. Well, it's lovely to have you on, John. I'm really excited for this chat. And yeah, I suppose I just want to take it naturally in a chronological order then. Well, obviously you have seen the massive shift throughout your career. It's developed alongside your own progression. But take me back to the early days as to what digital forensics was like. I'm talking going all the way back to when computers were first introduced. I'm talking about floppy disks, hard drives. I know you said there was a bit of a shift in 2016, but I'm talking pre that. What was it like in the early days?
Yeah, absolutely. So in 1998, I would say a lot of the police officers in the force at the time are probably more mature in service. And I'll mention that later, and please remind me of the reasons why I mentioned that. So there was a lot of them more mature in service, and the exposure in 1998 to mobile phones and computers was probably significantly different to the younger officers we have in service now. But I mean, if we look back to 1998, and I can remember having my first mobile phone around that time, dare I say it, we had a Nokia brick.
Yes.
With a battery life of about 25 years, which was fantastic.
Just about needing a charge now.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you went to a house, you'd probably, if you were fortunate enough, you'd probably have a single computer there that was powered on. And the likelihood of that being attached to the internet was probably very, very remote.
Depends if someone's on phone, doesn't it? On landline.
Yeah, absolutely. Or you could hear something ticking away in the background, making that modem sound.
Yeah.
So 1998, if we went and done a premises search or warrant or a normal search, realistically, we would have been very lucky to find anything digital-wise to come in. But I think in 1998, even if you then did have something digital, there was nothing enabled within policing for that. And quite interestingly, I managed to have a conversation, a guy called Russell, who was the original sergeant who started the digital forensics capability off in 2003 in West Midlands Police. Really nice guy, really very knowledgeable. And I was chatting to him and I said, how did it all start? And he was working in the contact centre, the call centre where they do the 999 calls, and he just had a hobby and an interest in computers. And one day there was a login. They said they'd gone to some house and they'd done a warrant, and they found loads of floppy drives. And they said, what do we do with these? Because there was no capability or capacity in force. And because he was just there at the right time and he had an interest with computers, and he said, oh, if you bring them over, we can have a look. And I think that's how the wheels started turning around that time to get that digital forensics capability within West Midlands Police.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously 2003. There's a little bit of progression now. Like you say, you've been in the force for about 5-6 years. Is that correct? Around about this time.
Yeah, about that time.
Yeah. So obviously you mentioned there the Nokia bricks, but then also the mobile phones started exploding in the mid 2000s, and I'm sure not only did that change the whole landscape of what we know today, but also I'm guessing your line of work in terms of like just how mobile phones. It's just like all of a sudden this world's just explosion where everyone can kind of give that little bit of evidence because they've all come with a little camera. So it's like the general public kind of, or without knowing it, collecting all this evidence through their smartphones, through sort of messenger apps which started to come on, I'm guessing obviously a little bit later in the 2010s era with your Snapchats, your Telegrams, your WhatsApps. This mobile phone dominance, how did that start to then evolve what digital forensics started to look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when I started on counter-terrorism in 2007, even then it's what we call dead box forensics, as in it's coming, it's not really attached to any services. If it's attached to the service, the most service is going to have is the records around cellular data. When was the phone powered on, what's the mass example, but there was no cloud provisions, no services. So it wasn't really at that time, and I think it was coming on to Nokia now. There are other mobile phone manufacturers, but I think my first work phone that I had, I think, was a Nokia N95. I can remember it now, and it was a big flip-up thing with a screen on.
Yes.
And that was the first time you could actually go to a web page for us on a device, really. And at that stage, I mean, that was around 2007. There wasn't really a massive uptake of people using those services, really, that was coming in. So I would say for the first couple of years in counter-terrorism, a lot of stuff we were doing when I was on that team was literally taking the data off the devices once they were powered off, in a powered off state. I think from the explosion of that has literally been the amount of apps that have been coming on, the amount of cloud services that have been coming on. So if we go from 1998 to hardly anyone having a phone to 2007 to 2010, those mobile technologies coming on board to where we are now, I would say even having the phone is only half of the story, because then we're looking at the rest of the cloud data, the associated apps, and all that other type of data that's in these different sources. So there's a massive increase around those services and around that data that we are seeing.
And what was the culture like, obviously, around about the late 2010s? It's like, obviously, you moved away from this floppy disk time already. We're now onto so much more data. Did the police start to think like, right, Crash, we've got the game has changed, like crimes are starting to involve a lot more digital evidence? What was the culture like in that shift? Did you start to see it a little bit around about that time?
Yeah, definitely. I think everything with policing is a priority. There's always different amounts of priorities, and fundamentally there's only X amount of budget, and so there's always competing demands. And also is, how do you get heard when you're dealing with senior leaders who are probably coming towards the end of their service, who don't really understand the impact of digital policing. So how can you be informative to get their attention to say, look, this is where we should be putting resources, this is where we should be putting demand. And I think what's key, all policing is key, so no particular team is better than the other, but I think sometimes we've got that, we're like a force multiplier. So if we get a digital device, for example, and we're getting that in, that could negate X amount of other inquiries that a police officer has to do. And that could be time, expense on vehicles, bailing, all that type of stuff. But if we can get into that digital device as soon as, we can help prove or disprove that offence, which helps to reduce the cost of the time, but also a better service for the victim at the end, because we can go to speedier justice. So I think what's really key is we always have to have a voice to be heard and to understand. I think, dare I say it, because I'm pretty sure others will listen to this, that I think policing now is at a part where there's different generations coming through of senior leaders, where they understand digital policing a lot more. So if we go back about 10, 15 years ago, the generation of senior leaders would have been joining in the 80s, coming towards the end of their service, and a lot of this digital devices was pretty uncommon to them. Very, very good if you spoke to them around normal volume or acquisitive crime, shoplifting, serious sexual offences, murders, anything like that. They've got the book and they know it. But if you turn around and say, there's loads of kids at home doing loads of scripts, producing loads of malware, sending it out to loads of people, or doing this, you could just see people's heads go. So it's how do we deliver that message to keep people engaged, senior leaders engaged, so they're listening to what we're saying. We're not trying to overcomplicate it or over-egg it. How do we stay relevant within digital forensics? And also, any of the requests that we ask for have got to be purposeful, because we're still taking that same pot of money. So I think it's really important that anything we ask for has a purpose and we can deliver it as well, which is really key.
It's a really interesting point, a really good cultural insight there as well. And it starts with any walk of life. Like the generational shift is always going to be sort of a bit of a battle, because as a human race, we're naturally meant to evolve, aren't we? In terms of like the next generation should be better than the last in terms of all walks of life, just because it's a knowledge transfer, isn't it? But that's a really interesting sort of point there, John. And to shift it slightly from the cultural change, how did the police sort of deal with the scalability and complexity of the data now that you're sort of dealing with? You're going from these floppy drives where, like you say, the data isn't massive, but then all of a sudden it's just exploded, and you've only got the same amount of time in a day. And like you say, you're still sort of, I'm guessing, in the mindset of like, look, these crimes are still of a physical nature, and therefore we need to be sort of like having sort of physical workflows. How do you dedicate the man hours and the time for analysis of this digital evidence then?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first and foremost is working with partners is really key.
Okay.
So when I say partners, that's not just policing partners, that's also partners in commercial world who can offer us software solutions at a reasonable price, I must say, but offer something that's realistic. Now, I'm not here to talk about other commercial entities or how they deliver products, but I think sometimes we'll get people coming to us and they've got some great ideas. But I'm trying to say is, look, when you're dealing with the volume demand around digital that we see, we need a solution that deals with volume. It doesn't deal with niche for the longevity of it. So I think it's really key that I think the first most point is we need to work with partners. We won't get through these issues on our own. So to answer part of that question as well, West Midlands Police, we went into a really good place around what we call Project Fusion around 2021. So Project Fusion was getting rid of, well, we're not getting rid of, but amalgamating our computer team and mobile team into a data acquisition team and a data reporting team. So the purpose of that is that we can do joint reporting at the same time, acquire the devices, and we can be a lot quicker around looking at the data that was coming through instead of separate teams, not bringing that data together in a synergy. So it was a ridiculous scenario that you could have a computer and a phone in for the same job. The phone went to one team, the computer went to another team. They do reports, and then you've got two different digital forensics officers who then aren't putting those reports together, who are then handing that over to a single officer who's not a digital expert by any sort of a day, asking them to interpret it. So we moved away to stop that. A lot of use in cloud services, so we were the first force to go into cloud processing in the cloud and review tool in the cloud as well. And the final piece for that for us was dealing with that thing at the front end. So it's okay if we seize a device. So if we seize a device, police officer goes out to a scene, they'll seize that device, there'll then be a delay in getting that device over to us. It'll probably be in a property store for days or weeks. It'll then come over to us. Previously, it would have sat on the shelf for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, and they would have then someone in our team would have looked at it in the acquisition team. The problem being is that person's now being released from custody, so he or her would have been going home potentially, trying to access the device, remote wipe, accessing cloud services, deleting data in there. And when we're dealing with threat, harm, and risk, we need to deal with it a lot quicker. Or if we're turning up at scenes, for example, and we need to capture the RAM, volatile processes, any of that great data from devices, routers, switches, firewalls. You wouldn't do that without a scene attendance team. So the last piece of the puzzle for us was having a scene attendance team from September 2023. So our scene attendance team, we work from Monday to Sunday from 7 a.m. till 10 p.m. and we offer the force a response where we can go out to digital scenes, offer advice remotely. And from the feedback we've seen so far, it's a very used service. We're always in demand, and I think it's been well received in force.
Nice. That's a really good way of looking at it. And I suppose I just want to play just put quite a devil's advocate, I suppose a pessimistic way of looking at it, is with this these developments, this evolution of how you guys approach these things. What is the negative connotations attached? So what do I mean by that? Well, in terms of the amount of evidence that you've got to deal with becomes the risk of legislation, becomes the risk of how do you balance sort of privacy with policing, because people have these digital rights. So you've got all this new legislation coming in. It's same with how AI is being looked at right now. There's AI frameworks not necessarily in place at the moment, but it's coming into play, and therefore AI right now, even though it's this absolute wild west, the guardrails are going to be put in place very, very shortly. I imagine so with your line of work. Like, how did you start to work alongside serving justice, but within the right way? You can't just be like, right, you said in this WhatsApp chat, like a criminal offence, that means we are using this as evidence in the courtroom and you're going to prison, essentially. It doesn't necessarily work as simple as that, does it? So how do you balance your line of work alongside legislative frameworks and digital rights?
Yeah, obviously there's a lot of legislation that covers us and governs us for the right reasons, and I'll come on to that. But I think the key, most important part is the emotional awareness. Okay. Look, when I leave here, I'm a member of the public, and I'm treated no different to anybody else. And when we're thinking about this, we put our own element on it, is how would I like to be treated? Yeah. And that's not just buzzwords, that's the reality of what we do. So, you know, if someone's been locked up, it doesn't necessarily mean they're guilty.
Yep.
Far from it. If someone makes a complaint, it doesn't necessarily mean they're right or they're wrong. So what's really key is, so we're governed under the Forensic Science Regulators Act. Okay, and part of the Forensic Science Regulators Act is, part of that code, is there's a lot of stuff around there, is that we're always treating everything is innocent. We've got no duty. Our duty isn't to the police around forensic evidence to say we must find it on behalf of the police. We've got to be totally balanced and open. Part of that accreditation is we're inspected once a year by UCAS. So that's not just a technical inspection. They're checking all of our records, everything that we're doing, and part of those record checks can be the data protection notices. So for an example, that a suspect now, when their device comes into us, not only is there a submission form, there needs to be a data protection notice that's signed by a senior officer, and police officers no more can't turn around and say, I want all the data.
Yep.
Those days are gone. What they must do on the data protection notice is make sure, one, A, is it lawful? Of course it's going to be lawful by the time it comes to us, because what's the power it's been seized under? But also, is it proportionate? So if the intelligence or the evidence is that it's a harassment, for example, and they're sending messages via WhatsApp, it isn't proportionate to download the whole device. Okay. We'll just concentrate on that WhatsApp chat. Clearly a lot of governance around PACE, Police and Criminal Evidence Act, CPIA, Criminal Procedures Act, a lot of stuff around disclosure we're governed over. So there's a lot of governance around everything we do. We can't just deep dive into everything. It's got to be proportionate, it's got to be lawful, and the key one is collateral. So, you know, on a lot of devices, for example, is we'll find cross messages, cross reference, communications chat with others. Is how do we deal with that collateral? Yeah. So we have to farm that collateral out before we're giving that data to officers, because it has no bearing on that. And it comes back to that emotional awareness, is how would I want to be treated in that circumstance, and that's what we work on. Yeah,
it's so much more than just the crime itself, isn't it? And that's part of your role. And digital forensics is it's a very unique role in the sense of like where your empathy lies, where your emotional intelligence lies, because it's not a normal role, is it? Like the cases that you deal with on a daily basis, it's not a normal 9 to 5, is it, John?
No, absolutely not. And there's a lot of emotional awareness. That emotional awareness starts, you know, from the beginning, for that submission coming through until the end. You know, we're asking our staff, our boys and our girls within digital forensics to look at some of the most horrendous material going, and I do not underplay that. It can be absolutely horrendous. So when we look at this, we've really got to be mindful. Not only the data we're looking at is also protecting our staff as well. Yep. So it's that balance really. Is we're not going to keep going looking for everything and doing everything. It needs to be balanced around what we're looking for really. Yeah.
Couple of questions for you, John, and then we'll be pretty much at our time. So obviously we spoke a lot about the past. We've spoken about the present. Naturally, what does digital forensics look like moving forward then? What do you sort of foresee in your crystal ball?
Yeah, I think definitely a fundamental shift to the cloud. I think a fundamental shift to the cloud that back in 2008 or 9, I can remember Windows 7. Yeah, definitely Windows 7. I was trying to get that right. And I can remember people saying BitLock was coming in. It's the end of the world. We'll all be out of a job, etc., etc. Yet here we still are.
Yes.
Obviously, different types of phone encryption coming in over that time. People were going to be out of a job. Yet here we are, still in a job.
Yep.
I think the one thing that I have noticed, I'm not saying it concerns me, because I think we just got to be mindful of it, is the shift to the cloud. You know, a lot of this data is moving from these devices and it's going into the cloud. So how do we deal with that? So we need to look at how do we get that data from the cloud in a proportionate manner and a lawful manner, I think is really key. But the other concern that does deal with is large data sets. So crimes now, it's been reported by the MPCC that over 90% of crimes have a digital element. So that digital element isn't just computers or phones, it can be cloud, it can be CCTV, it can be that data from the washing machine that's being used in that murder, for example, or Nest home heating systems. So that whole footprint of digital data is about 90%. So we can get all that data in, but we need to be able to carve and process that data and make that data in such a tangible way that people can review it in simplistic terms. I think if you looked at the average DF report that's produced by these tools, me personally, I don't think they're user friendly for people who are on the back end getting these, because if they were giving them a 800-page PDF, and we're talking about SSIDs, MAC addresses, link file shell bags, it just blows the mind.
Yep.
So I think what we need to do is the ecosystem should look in the future around, once we've got all this data, where does it sit? How do we make it actionable so there's evidence? How can we get intelligence from it where it's all still governed around lawfulness and proportionality? I think policing needs to be careful that we can have all this data, but then we're at risk if we don't do anything with that data, because we could be sitting on really great bits and nuggets of intelligence or evidence to suggest a further offence is going to happen. So I think once we've got it, and if we've got it lawfully, we need to do something with it. That's either process it to make it intelligence or get rid of it because we don't need it, for example. So yeah, I think for me the biggest shift is to the cloud. I think dealing with large data sets and how do we process that and how do we allow those within policing to review that in an easy manner.
Fantastic. Last question for you, John, is what are some of your biggest headaches? What's keeping you up at night? Now, this doesn't have to be anything that we spoke about today. It's just literally what's your biggest headache at this moment in time?
Yeah, I think it's probably the understanding that is people. I want to say people. Probably the media may have this portrayal that we'll always be ahead of the curve. We won't be ahead of the curve, and we should be ahead of the curve if I'm honest. I think if we're looking at a wave, where we want to be is on top of that wave to deal with that demand.
Yes.
I think if we went to the front of that wave and we're trying to deal with little niche areas, yes, it's nice, but it could distract us from that volume demand coming in. I think what's really key is we need to stay focused on what we do, and within policing is just understand that digital policing now is not going to go away.
Yep.
And I think there needs to be more of a continuous shift to understand with our frontline officers of, even though we're not going to turn them into digital forensics experts, enhancing them with low-level tools and the understanding of how they can deal with the device at the front end. So niche teams like mine don't do that, because realistically you won't have a niche team like mine of hundreds of cops. So we just need to make sure those frontline cops or police staff investigators have that knowledge and confidence to be able to deal at the front end. I think that's probably one concern for me.
Brilliant. John, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting, and thank you very much for coming on the Security Space podcast. Cheers.
Okay.